My name is Marin Elwood, and I am 29 years old. If someone had told me a year ago that one dinner, one ordinary Sunday dinner, would finally expose 12 years of manipulation, I would have laughed. Because in my family, explosions don't happen in moments. They happen in layers, quietly, slowly, like rot beneath polished wood. And that night, the rot finally surfaced. The house smelled like grilled steak and rosemary. My father was outside at the grill, humming like he always did on weekends. My boyfriend Adrian, a sweet, soft-spoken architectural designer I'd been seeing for 3 months, was inside helping set the table. For once, I thought maybe, just maybe, this evening would go smoothly. I should have known better. When I stepped back inside, I felt it immediately. A tension, a stillness, the kind you can sense even before you see its source. Adrian was frozen in front of the dining table, holding a stack of plates, like he wasn't sure what a plate even was. His face was pale eyes, uneasy. And standing opposite him was my stepmother, arms crossed, lips curved into the familiar, self-satisfied smirk I had come to dread. I forced a smile. "Everything okay?" "Oh, yes," she answered smoothly, brushing invisible dust from her perfectly pressed blouse. We had a very enlightening chat. Just some things your boyfriend should probably know about you. My stomach dropped. Here we go again. Adrian cleared his throat. "Your stepmom was telling me about your mom." My stepmother clasped her hands behind her back like she was giving a sermon. "I just believe honesty is important. Don't you, Marin? People should know what they're signing up for in a relationship. She should be upfront about her emotional damage." My mouth dried. "What exactly did you tell him?" "That your mother abandoned you when you were 14. That kind of trauma creates trust issues, attachment problems, emotional instability." She shrugged casually. Better he knows now, rather than waste his time. My hand tightened on the chair. There it was, again. The lie she'd weaponized for over a decade. I felt myself slipping into autopilot, the quiet, controlled mask I'd mastered long ago. "Adrian," I said gently, "that isn't true." My stepmother scoffed. "Sweetheart denial is a very real stage of grief. You've been stuck in it for years. She left you. Everyone knows that." Everyone. The word echoed, as if she had the right to rewrite my life. I inhaled slowly, pulling out my phone. "You know what, Adrian? She's right about one thing. I do have issues, but not the ones she's talking about." My stepmother's smile faltered. "Don't start." "Oh, I'm just continuing the conversation you already started." I scrolled to a file I'd saved 2 weeks ago and pressed play. Her voice filled the dining room, crisp and unmistakably hers. "This new guy seems sweet, but give it a month. I've gotten rid of 5 already. He has no idea. Last one I told him she had anger issues completely made up, but he believed it. The one before that I mentioned she was drowning in debt. This time I'm thinking the abandonment story again. Works every time. They get scared of all the emotional baggage and run. Just need to keep this up a few more years until she gives up entirely. Then my son gets the full inheritance. Why should he have to split anything with her?" Her friend's laughter echoed faintly in the background. The recording ended. Silence fell. Adrian looked like someone had unplugged his soul. My stepmother's face blanched, then flushed red. "That's taken out of context," she snapped. "There's more," I replied. I pulled up the second recording from last month, where she confided in her sister about sabotaging any chance I had of a future marriage, because a married daughter meant my inheritance would be legally split. My stepmother jumped forward. "Turn that off. You cannot record people without their permission." "One-party consent state," I said calmly. "I can." She lunged for my phone. Adrian instinctively stepped between us. My stepmother recoiled like he'd shoved her, though he hadn't even touched her. Just then, the sliding door opened. My father walked in carrying a plate of burgers, smiling until he saw the room. "What's going on?" "Dad," I said quietly, "you need to hear this." His eyes narrowed. "What happened?" My stepmother rushed to him dramatically. "Honey, Marin is trying to ruin our family with lies." "That's enough," I cut in. "Sit down, Dad." He hesitated only a moment before obeying. I pressed play again. The kitchen filled with her voice, scheming, arrogant, unfiltered. Each sentence chipped away at 12 years of manufactured peace. Each confession carved into the illusion my father had lived under. When the last recording ended, no one moved for several seconds. Then my father whispered, 12 years. You've been doing this for 12 years. My stepmother's face twisted. "I was protecting this family. You were destroying my daughter's life," he said hoarsely. She threw her hands up, furious, her mask cracking. "What was I supposed to do? Let her marry some stranger and take half of your business away from my son. He deserves it. She's not even mine." There it was. the truth beneath all the lies. Adrian stepped away, slowly shaking his head. I think I should go. He wasn't running from me. He was running from the madness swirling in front of him. I didn't blame him. He murmured an apology, squeezed my hand, and walked out the front door. My stepmother's voice followed him. See? This is why no man stays with her. I exhaled shakily. For years I had wondered if I was the problem. Why every relationship fell apart. Why every boyfriend left, confused, uncomfortable, distant. Now I knew. It had never been me. And my stepmother, realizing that truth had finally surfaced, looked at me like a caged animal, suddenly aware the lock was on the outside. She whispered, "You don't understand what you've done." I met her gaze steadily. "Oh, I understand perfectly." My father closed his eyes like the weight of every lie finally landed. "Marin," he said, "start from the beginning." I did. And with every word, the foundation beneath our family cracked, just a little more. My father sat down slowly, as if his legs were no longer fully connected to the rest of him. The plate of burgers was still in his hands, steam curling upward and disappearing into the tense air. My stepmother hovered behind him, pale and shaking, but not from remorse, from fear, from exposure. I took a breath. "Dad, I need you to listen to everything." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Start." So I did. I told him about the strange patterns that had followed every single one of my relationships for the past 12 years. How every boyfriend I brought home grew distant after meeting her. How they would say the same phrases, the same concerns phrases that were never theirs. Concerns that weren't real. Doubts that felt planted. I told him about the sudden breakups that made no sense. How each man pulled away like he'd been warned off. How every relationship became haunted by a shadow I couldn't identify until recently. My stepmother crossed her arms defensively. "This is absurd. Marin is exaggerating. She's always been dramatic." My father raised a hand, silencing her. "Let her finish." His voice wasn't loud, but it had weight. I continued. "I started noticing the pattern 2 months ago. I kept thinking, maybe I really am choosing the wrong people. But then I found my old texts with Mateo, the one I dated last year. He suddenly told me he was afraid I had anger issues. I'd never been angry with him a day in my life." My stepmother snorted. "And then, Eric," I continued. "Out of nowhere, he told me he was worried I was drowning in debt. I wasn't. I had just shown Dad my savings that week." My father stiffened. He remembered that. "And Liam," I said, my voice softening. "He told me his mom thought I had unresolved trauma from being abandoned, and he didn't want to get pulled into a messy family dynamic." I looked straight at my stepmother. That one sounded familiar. She glared but didn't speak. My father exhaled sharply, rubbing the space between his eyebrows, his gesture for overwhelm, exhaustion, disbelief. This is insane," he whispered. "Why would you do something like that? Why sabotage her life?" My stepmother stepped forward, tears building instantly too fast, too rehearsed. "I was protecting her," she cried, "and protecting this family. People take advantage. Marin doesn't know when someone is using her." "That's not what you said in the recordings," I said quietly. She froze. My father swallowed hard. "What recordings?" I played the rest. The full 40 minutes. Every sentence, every vile justification. My stepmother bragging about sabotaging 5 of my boyfriends, laughing about planting lies, relishing how easily men believed her, listing my relationships like trophies she'd hunted down, talking about inheritance and her son, talking about me like I was an obstacle, not a daughter. At one point, the version of her in the recording said, "If she gives up on dating, perfect. Then everything goes to my son. I can't risk her getting married. Not until the will is updated." When the final clip ended, the silence in the living room was raw and jagged. My father stared ahead, his expression hollowed out. She planned all of this," he said faintly. "For 12 years. My stepmother placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "I was just trying to protect our family. You know how fragile Marin can be." He shrugged her hand off. That had never happened before. Her voice sharpened into panic. "You're letting her twist things. You know how emotional she gets, how she—" "Stop," he said. She blinked rapidly. "But—" "Stop." The word hit like an axe. She inhaled sharply, her face cracking in disbelief. My father turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Because I didn't have proof," I whispered. "And because a part of me believed her. I started thinking maybe I really was the problem, that I wasn't enough, that something was wrong with me." Saying it out loud hurt more than I expected. My father closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were wet but steady. "I failed you," he said quietly. "I should have protected you." My stepmother exploded. "Oh, please. She's manipulating you right now. Can't you see it? She's always resented me, always tried to turn you against me." "Enough," he said again. But this time his voice wasn't shaky. It was firm. She trembled in anger. "You're choosing her over me." "I'm choosing the truth over your lies," he said. Her face twisted into something almost feral. "You want truth," she hissed. "Fine. The truth is, I sacrificed everything to become your wife. I raised your daughter." "You met her when she was 17, he corrected flatly. "I gave this family 12 years of my life, and you spent 12 years tearing my daughter's life apart." She shook her head rapidly. No. You don't understand. If she marries." "You mean if she doesn't stay alone," I said. "Because that's what you planned for me, isn't it?" She glared at me like I'd betrayed some unwritten rule. "You were supposed to share. You were supposed to accept that my son deserves something too." "My business," my father said sharply. "Is that what this is about?" Her silence was answer enough. His voice cracked. Everything you said, everything you did, was for money." She finally snapped. "What do you expect? He's your child. And so is she." The room fell completely still. It was the first time in years I'd heard him say that so plainly. My stepmother's face flushed in fury. "No, she's not mine. She never was. And I will not let her take what belongs to my son." It was the first honest thing she'd said all night. My father stood his chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood. "You need to move to the guest room," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." "No," she spat. "If anyone is leaving, it should be her. I am your wife." "And this is my home," he replied. "Move to the guest room, or leave." She stared at him as if he had stabbed her. Then she hissed, "You'll regret this." She stormed down the hallway, grabbing her purse. A moment later, she slammed the front door so hard the windows rattled. My father sank onto the couch, looking 10 years older than he had an hour ago. His eyes drifted to mine, tired, broken, hurting. He whispered, "Mary, what do we do now?" For the first time in my life, I felt the roles shift. I wasn't the daughter needing protection. I was the woman holding the truth that would dismantle everything he thought he knew. I sat down next to him. "Dad," I said quietly, "we're just getting started." My father didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing the hallway, the creaking floorboards, marking every step of a man trying to understand the last 12 years of his life. I lay awake too, staring at my ceiling, letting the truth settle. It didn't settle. By morning, everything felt heavier. When I walked into the kitchen, my father was already there, sitting at the table with a cold cup of coffee. He looked up at me with the expression of someone who had aged overnight. "She wasn't in the guest room," he said quietly. "She left." He shook his head. "No, her car's still here." It didn't take long to find out where she'd gone. There was yelling outside. Sharp, angry yelling, her voice unmistakable. Then a loud knock rattled the front door. My father stiffened. "Don't answer that." But I already knew who it was. I opened the door anyway. My stepmother stood there with her sister, both of them dressed like they were heading to war. Her sister pointed an accusatory finger at me before I even said a word. "You should be ashamed," she snapped. "Recording private conversations. Harassing your own stepmother. Do you want to drive her to a breakdown?" My stepmother folded her arms dramatically. "She already has." I blinked. "This is your angle that I'm bullying you." "You are," her sister shouted. "This is elder abuse." My father let out a disbelieving laugh behind me. "She's 58 and runs 5Ks on weekends," he muttered. "Elder abused my ass." My stepmother ignored him completely and stepped forward nose inches from mine. "You think you're clever. You think you've won. You haven't. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." "No," my father said sharply from behind me. "It's ours. And right now you're not acting like family." She turned toward him, eyes full of venom. "The only reason you're siding with her is because she's been manipulating you. She's always been jealous of me, even before we were married." I stared at her, stunned. "Jealous of you?" "Yes," she screeched. "You could never accept that I became his wife. You've always wanted to be the center of his world." I let out a breathy, disbelieving laugh. "I wanted a normal family, not whatever this is." Her sister jabbed her finger again. "We will take this to court." My father massaged his temples. "Then go. But until then, you're no longer welcome in this house." My stepmother's eyes went wild. "You can't do that. I'm your wife. I have rights." My father sighed tiredly. "I owned this home before we married. Leave." She sputtered, then spun on her heel and stormed off, her sister following in a dramatic swirl of scarves and indignation. I closed the door quietly. My father sank into a chair again. "She's completely lost it," he whispered. "Not lost," I said slowly. "Just exposed." The next 2 days felt like breathing in and out of someone else's life. No shouting, no manipulation, no false sweetness coating the air. But peace never lasts long in my family. On the third day, my father called me while I was at work. His voice was shaking. She filed a police report. What? She's claiming you've been harassing her, threatening her, stalking her. He exhaled shakily. The officer said they needed to talk to you. My chest tightened. I haven't even spoken to her since she left. I know, he said. Just keep your phone ready. 2 hours later, a police officer stood outside my apartment door. He looked tired, like he'd seen dozens of cases just like this, people using the legal system as a weapon. He pulled out a notepad. Miss Elwood, your stepmother has filed a complaint stating you've been contacting her repeatedly with threatening messages. I blinked. Officer, I haven't texted her once. Not a single time. He nodded. Can I see your phone? I handed it over immediately. He scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. Finally, he looked up. All right, there's nothing here. I exhaled. She also claimed you left her a threatening voicemail, the officer continued. Oh, I said. I do have a voicemail, but she left it. I played it. Her voice filled the apartment. You've always been jealous of my son. Always wanted your father to yourself. When he realizes how you manipulated all of this, you'll be left with nothing. Nothing. I gave 12 years to this family, and you won't take that from me. The officer closed his eyes, exasperated. Miss Elwood, keep every message, every recording, every video. If she files another false report, you'll be eligible to pursue charges for harassment and filing knowingly false claims. I nodded. But inside something shifted, not fear. Resolve. She wasn't going to stop, not until she burned everything down. 2 days later, my doorbell camera sent me an alert. There she was standing outside my apartment door, stabbing the doorbell with her finger. I watched through my phone as she knocked for 10 full minutes. Then her voice changed sharp, frantic. I know you're in there. Tell your father the truth. Tell him you edited those recordings. You're destroying my family. My family, not our family. I didn't answer. I just saved the footage and sent it to my father and his lawyer. 10 minutes later, my dad called. She's gone off the rails, he said. You're not safe being alone with her nearby. I'm fine, I said, but I could hear my heart pounding. She's already tried to weaponize the law. She'll escalate. He wasn't wrong, because the escalations weren't over. The next morning, my supervisor called me into his office. He wasn't angry, just uncomfortable. Marin, we received an email from someone claiming to be your stepmother. She says you've been engaging in illegal surveillance and emotional harassment, and she's concerned about your mental stability. My blood ran cold. She contacted my workplace. He nodded. She copied multiple managers. My hands trembled slightly as I opened my phone. Sir, here is what's actually happening. I played a portion of the recording. Then I showed him the doorbell footage. Then the voicemail. By the time I finished, he exhaled a long breath. So you're dealing with a vindictive ex-stepmother, he said. Thank you for telling us. We'll be documenting her behavior as harassment. If she contacts the company again, tell me immediately. She had tried to get me fired, and it backfired. That night, my stepbrother called. He didn't sound angry. He sounded scared. Marin, he said breathlessly. Mom is planning something. She keeps saying she needs to make him see the truth and protect what's ours. I don't know what she means, but it sounds bad. Thanks for the heads up, I said quietly. And she asked me to lie for her. She wants me to tell people you've always been violent, that she's scared of you. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. What did you say? I told her no, he whispered. And she called me a traitor. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Be careful, he added. She's not thinking straight anymore. He didn't have to say it. I already knew. Because the next morning, a court officer knocked on my father's door with a thick envelope. Divorce papers and a restraining order request. Filed against him, claiming he'd been emotionally, financially, and physically abusive, with zero evidence. My father sat at the dining table, holding the papers with shaking hands. She's trying to destroy us, he whispered. No, I said quietly. She's trying to drown us before she sinks. I looked at him. At least now we know exactly who we're dealing with. This wasn't chaos anymore. This was war. My father's lawyer read through the restraining order request 3 times. Each pass slower than the last, his eyebrows climbing higher with every page. When he finally set it down, he exhaled sharply through his nose. This is impressive, he said dryly. A masterpiece of fiction. She claims your father threw objects at her, threatened her life, hid money from her, and isolated her from her family. My father blinked. I haven't raised my voice at her in years. I know, the lawyer replied. But false allegations don't need truth. They need timing. My stomach twisted. She's trying to trap him legally. She's trying to force leverage, he corrected. If this restraining order passed, she could claim the house push for emergency spousal support and paint herself as the victim. She's creating a legal narrative that benefits her in divorce court. My father leaned back, overwhelmed. She really planned all of this. The lawyer looked between us, and the only reason we have a fighting chance is because Marin recorded everything. My stepmother would hate hearing that, but the war had only just begun. The hearing was set for a week later, a week of tension, a week of my stepmother's escalating madness. On day 2, she attempted to get into my father's house again, but he had already changed the locks. The doorbell camera caught everything. Her trying her key, shouting, banging on the door, kicking it so hard the frame shook. My father forwarded the footage to his lawyer immediately. On day 4, she started calling my father nonstop, crying, screaming, apologizing, threatening, begging, cycling through emotions like a roulette wheel on fire. He blocked her. Then she called from her sister's phone. He blocked that too. By day 6, the silence was almost worse, because silence meant planning. That night, I sat on my couch, scrolling through receipts and documentation I had begun organizing for my father's lawyer. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to be helpful. But then something caught my eye. A bank statement, a vendor name I didn't recognize. Precision Consulting Services, $2,000 every month. I frowned. Who was that? My father didn't outsource work often, and certainly not consulting. I texted him immediately. Marin, Dad. What's Precision Consulting? Dad never heard of it. Why Marin? They've been paid from the business account. Dad. How much, Marin? $2,000 every month. Over 2 years. Dad. That can't be right. He came over within 15 minutes. When he looked at the statements, his expression flickered from confusion, panic, betrayal. We don't use consultants, he whispered. We haven't used a consultant in years. I opened my laptop. I'm going to find out who this is. He nodded silently. It took about 2 hours, but the moment I saw the registration details, I felt my body go cold. That's her, I whispered. My father's eyebrows knit. What? Precision Consulting Services. Registered under her maiden name. Address is a P.O. box, and the business account is tied to a joint bank account between her and her sister. My father stared like the world was tilting. She's been stealing from the business. I nodded. Almost $50,000. He sat back stunned and empty, and then his voice hardened. Send everything to my lawyer. The lawyer called her lawyer that same night. The message was simple. Drop the restraining order. Withdraw fabricated abuse claims. Agree to reasonable divorce terms, or we file criminal charges for embezzlement. Her lawyer panicked, and the next morning abruptly withdrew from representing her. Conflict of interest? Surprise. Which meant she now had no attorney and a pending restraining order hearing she was completely unprepared for. I thought she might lie low. I was wrong. On the day before the hearing, she showed up at my father's house. Not quietly, not remorsefully. She pounded on the door and screamed until the camera recorded every word with crystal clarity. You can't do this. That money was compensation. I managed that business. I deserve that money. My father spoke through the door, voice exhausted. You stole from my company. I earned it. You never paid me for everything I did. I handled the books. You asked to help with bookkeeping. As a favor, not a paid position. I sacrificed everything for this family. You sabotaged my daughter's life for 12 years, he said flatly. You manipulated inheritance. You stole $50,000. And you're still acting like the victim. She broke. Not into tears, into rage. You ungrateful bastard. You think she loves you more than I did. She turned you against me. My father exhaled deeply. You did that yourself. Leave. She kicked the door, screamed, and left with a final threat. You will regret this. The restraining order hearing was the final nail. She showed up with a bargain bin lawyer who looked like he'd been hired the night before. My father's lawyer presented everything. Bates. The recordings. The false police report. The workplace harassment email. The doorbell footage. The attempt to break in. The threats. The financial records showing theft. The judge skimmed her request and raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Halden, he said slowly. Do you have any evidence of abuse? They isolated me. They turned my son against me. Is there evidence of physical or financial abuse? No, but... Any witnesses? No, but... The judge shut the file. Request denied. And Mrs. Halden, your filings appear to be retaliatory, not legitimate. If you continue with frivolous accusations, you may face sanctions. My stepmother snapped. He turned my son against me. He's isolating me. This is abuse. Ma'am, the judge warned, compose yourself. She did not compose herself. She screamed. She pointed at me. She called me a manipulative liar. She claimed we were conspiring to ruin her life. She even banged her fist on the table. Contempt of court. $500 fine, the judge said calmly. Bailiff escort her out. As she was dragged out, she kept yelling, "You won't get away with this. You won't get away with any of this." But she already had. For 12 years. Her time was up. My father and I walked out of the courtroom in silence. Not triumphant, not relieved. Just done. But the real storm, the divorce, the criminal investigation, the unraveling of everything she thought she controlled, that was still coming. And I wasn't afraid anymore, because we finally had the truth. And she finally had consequences she could no longer outrun. The divorce moved faster than anyone expected, not because my stepmother cooperated, but because every lie she tried to use as leverage collapsed under the weight of evidence she couldn't outrun anymore. Her dramatic restraining order attempt had backfired. Her lawyer quitting had left her scrambling. And the embezzlement trail, every payment, every signature, every fake consulting invoice had locked her into a corner she didn't have the tools, allies, or sanity to escape. The judge assigned to the divorce case was the same one who had just fined her for contempt. The moment the hearings began, you could see it in his expression. He already knew exactly what kind of woman he was dealing with. The financial investigator provided by my father's lawyer submitted the full breakdown. $48,000 stolen over 2 years. Each payment disguised as a business expense. Each check approved by her via forged invoice. The investigator concluded what was painfully obvious. Precision Consulting Services is not a legitimate vendor. It exists solely to siphon funds into a personal account belonging to Mrs. Halden and her sister. My stepmother naturally tried to spin it. It was compensation, she cried in court. They refused to pay me for bookkeeping. I worked for that business. The investigator didn't even look up from his papers. "Ma'am, you never performed consulting services. You submitted no reports, no hours. You only signed checks to yourself." Her new bargain attorney cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we can focus on equitable asset division." The judge cut him off. "Once we finish with the criminal portion." Her face went white. Because now it wasn't just divorce, it was crime. My father didn't want to send her to jail. He told his lawyer quietly, "I just want my money back. That's all." So instead of charging her fully, the lawyer negotiated with the DA plea deal. Probation. Restitution. Community service. Her attorney grabbed the offer like a drowning man clutching a rope. She had no choice. She took it. Restitution meant every dollar she'd stolen had to be paid back in full. And that money was coming out of her divorce settlement. When the judge finalized the divorce, he listed assets, as if reading an obituary of her schemes. The house awarded to my father, he owned it pre-marriage. The business awarded to my father, she had stolen from it. Retirement accounts awarded to my father. Savings split only after deducting her theft. She would have received about $90,000 from the marital assets. But after subtracting $48,000 in restitution and fees, she walked away with roughly $45,000 in her car. She tried to argue. Oh, she tried. "That business should be half mine," she screamed. "I was a partner. I gave my life to that man." The judge didn't blink. "You stole from the business you now claim to have managed. You have no grounds for ownership." Tears didn't help. Screaming didn't help. Insults didn't help. For the first time in 12 years of knowing her nothing, she did worked. She had lost her power. After court, my father and I walked out into the parking lot. He was silent for a long time before he finally said, "I wasted 12 years on someone who saw us as obstacles." I shook my head. "She saw you as an opportunity. She saw me as a threat." He winced. "Marin, I didn't know. I truly didn't." "I know," I said quietly. "She hid it well." He rubbed his face, and when he looked at me again, his eyes were clearer than they'd been in months. "I'm grateful you caught her," he whispered, "even if it destroyed everything." I didn't say it out loud, but the truth settled between us. The family she destroyed had never actually included her. She was only ever borrowing it. She moved in with her sister after the divorce, two bitter women, in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, whispering poison back and forth like it was oxygen. My stepbrother called me a week later. "She's losing it," he said, still telling everyone she was betrayed and robbed. "She keeps insisting you and Dad brainwashed me." I sighed. "I'm sorry you're going through this. It's not your fault. She made her choices." There was a pause. Then he exhaled shakily. "I told her she needs help. Real help. She screamed at me, said I was dead to her. So, I'm done." "You cut contact." "Yes," he whispered. "She won't get help. She just wants someone to blame." The sadness in his voice made my chest tighten. "She's my mom," he added quietly, "but she's not the person I thought she was." I understood that pain in a way he never expected. "Thank you for choosing peace," I said softly. He let out a rough laugh. "I'm choosing sanity. Peace is a bonus." We talked another 10 minutes about work, about dad, about the business before he said, "She spent 12 years trying to push you out so I'd inherit everything, but all she did was lose the family she had. That's on her." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. Things at the machine shop changed almost overnight. With her gone, the atmosphere lifted. The tension vanished. My father stopped flinching every time his phone buzzed. My stepbrother became calmer, easier to talk to, almost warm. They worked side by side, organizing bookkeeping she had deliberately sabotaged for years. One evening, my father finally updated his will. A simple, quiet meeting at his attorney's office. When we walked out into the late afternoon sun, he placed a hand on my shoulder. 50-50 split between you and your stepbrother, he said. My portion of the business is yours equally. No more secrets. No more manipulation. I nodded. My father wasn't perfect, but he was trying. For the first time in years, he was trying. And that meant something. Meanwhile, my own life, my quiet, painful, untended life, began shifting too. Therapy sucked. It cracked me open, peeled back years of self-doubt, revealed wounds I didn't know had names. My therapist said something that stuck with me for weeks. You internalized her narrative so deeply, you began sabotaging yourself. Not because you believed you were damaged, because she convinced you no one else could love you. I sat in my car after that session and cried harder than I had in years. Because it was true. I had ended relationships before they even had the chance to grow, beating her to the punch. If I ended them, she couldn't ruin them. If I pulled away, I couldn't lose. It was survival. Twisted, but survival. And now I was learning how to live without bracing for sabotage. My boyfriend Adrian surprised me the most. He didn't run, didn't judge, didn't call me too much. He called me brave. 8 months together. He wasn't scared of my messy history. He wasn't scared of my stepmother. He wasn't scared of the world we had just dragged into the light. He stayed, not because I needed him, but because I chose him. Family dinners became peaceful, almost unnervingly peaceful. No backhanded comments, no pointed remarks about marriage or money, no tension rippling under every conversation. Just quiet. Safety. It was strange how easy it was to breathe without poison in the air. But the peace wasn't the ending. Not yet. There was still one more twist, one last manipulation waiting for me. A final letter, handwritten, 3 pages long. And it would prove that she was not done destroying, not until I delivered the final boundary myself. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I almost threw it out unopened. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Elegant loops, dramatic flourishes, the kind of script that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror for years. My name on the envelope wasn't written like a greeting. It was written like a performance. For a moment, I considered sending it straight to my father's lawyer. But a part of me, the part that had lived under her shadow for 12 years, wanted to know what her final move was. So I sat down at my kitchen table, poured a glass of water, and opened it. The first line set the tone instantly. Marin, I have always loved you like a daughter. I let out a humorless laugh. If manipulation had a scent, the letter reeked of it. I kept reading. She wrote about her sacrifices, how she held the family together, how she devoted her life to making your father happy, how she protected you even when you didn't appreciate it. And then she shifted. Her words softened, turned fragile, strategically fragile. I am devastated by how things turned out. I never wanted this. I never wanted to lose you or your father. This misunderstanding has ruined everything. Misunderstanding. Not lies, not sabotage, not manipulation. A misunderstanding. My throat tightened, not from sympathy, but from the familiarity of it. I had grown up with her rewriting reality in real time, reshaping events, until she was the victim in every scenario. She continued, Your father doesn't understand the pressure I was under, keeping a household together, managing finances, trying to make sure your brother had the future he deserved. I paused. Managing finances. That was one way to describe embezzling $48,000. The letter went on her words, becoming more desperate. I lost my marriage. I lost my home. I lost my stability. I am 59, Marin, and I am starting over with nothing. And there it was. The real purpose of the letter emerged like a stain spreading beneath water. I am asking no begging you to talk to your father about helping me. Not much. Just enough to get a small place. A 1-bedroom is fine. Somewhere safe. I closed my eyes. Of course this was her final move. She hadn't learned a thing. Not a single thing. She didn't apologize. She didn't acknowledge a single choice she made. She didn't take responsibility for the lies, the sabotage, the theft. For her consequences were just inconveniences she wanted someone else to fix. And I suddenly knew deep in my bones that this letter wasn't written to heal anything. It was written to manipulate me one last time, to tug on the version of me she had spent years shaping the girl who felt guilty simply for existing. But that girl was gone. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back into the envelope, and drove it to my father's house. He was in the workshop sorting through old inventory. When he saw the envelope in my hand, he sighed. "She wrote to you, too." I nodded. He leaned against this counter, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, what did she want? I passed him the letter. He read it quietly, eyes moving across the page, steadily expressionless. And then he laughed. Not a real laugh, not a happy one. A weary, almost disbelieving laugh. "She still doesn't understand," he murmured. "After everything, she still expects someone else to clean up her mess." "She asked for money," I said. "Of course she did," he replied. "She always believed the world owed her comfort." I stayed quiet. He placed the letter gently on the counter. "What do you want to do?" I took a breath. "I wrote her back," I said. His eyebrows lifted. "You did?" I nodded. "I wrote one sentence. And—" I looked at him. She needed to hear the truth. He waited. Then I told him. I wrote, "You didn't lose everything, you threw it away." My father stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, almost solemnly. "That's the first boundary you've ever set with her," he said softly. "Yeah," I whispered. "And the last." She never replied. Not a text, not a call, not a letter. My stepbrother later told me she read my sentence 3 times, crumpled the paper, and threw it across the room. Then she told everyone I was cold-hearted. I didn't care. Because by then, something inside me had shifted permanently. For years, I believed that family meant enduring, forgiving, absorbing hurt and pretending it didn't bruise. But now, family meant boundaries. Family meant truth. Family meant choosing peace over blood when blood becomes poison. Months passed. My father healed slowly, shedding pieces of guilt, one therapy session at a time. My stepbrother found a kind of freedom he never expected. The business thrived without her hands twisting behind the scenes. And I found myself again. Not the girl she had shaped, not the woman who believed love was conditional, not the person living in fear of emotional sabotage. I started dating with confidence instead of dread. I let Adrian into my life without waiting for the inevitable collapse. I learned to trust again, not blindly, but bravely. Our dinners became warm, our holidays peaceful, our silence safe. And slowly, my life began to look like something I could recognize as mine. Sometimes I still think about the 12 years she took from us, from me, from my father, from my stepbrother. But I don't dwell on them, because in the end, she taught me something I should have learned long ago. You cannot control a villain's story, but you can stop letting them narrate yours. And so I closed the chapter, locked the door, and walked forward. Not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She didn't lose everything.